Welcome to Retirement Mentorship. I am your host, Freeman Lindy, Certified Financial Planner. As mentioned on a past episode, we will be interspersing some guest-on episodes throughout the podcast, which is me appearing on episodes of other people's podcasts, talking about finances and as it relates to their topics and things that they're discussing. So if you want to hear some of the same things we talk about in this podcast, but through the lens of another podcast, through an interview with someone else, these are great episodes to just refresh. And it allows me to continue working on some of the other things that we're doing in-house here and allow me just to kind of spread out the content that we need to generate in order to keep it on schedule and keep something going, right? The show must go on. So we want to make sure we're publishing something weekly, and this allows us to just spread it out a little bit. So today's podcast, we are on the Route 664 podcast, which is the Road to Human Kindness. It's a podcast that's all about how do you pass on your money to the next generation or to charities in a way that helps avoid taxes. And they're all just really about all the different ways that they can do that. The host, Les, has a great voice, so he's just really fun to listen to. I wish I had a voice like him. Maybe in like 60 years, I'll do that. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope you learn some things too, because these are a few things in here that I don't always talk about. And so hopefully that'll be encouraging to you. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of Route 664, the Road to Human Kindness. I'm Les Winston, and I am an endowment engineer. I'm an ambassador. I do a lot of things in the community that make things better because I want to and I enjoy it. It's my genius. It's what I love doing 24 hours a day and never get tired of. And it's a very important part of our story when we talk about Route 664, the Road to Human Kindness. It's paved with social charity, new terminology that you may not be familiar with, but it means that you are able to create two endowments. You can create an endowment for yourself and an endowment for the future that you leave to the community into one of your favorite charities so that they are well taken care of going into the future. And you do that effortlessly and painlessly using very favorable tax provisions and a tax code that were put there many, many years ago in 1969. Congress had the infinite wisdom to know that we needed to build the charitable wealth in the country. And in order to do that, they created these sections of the tax code that enable you to do something very good for yourself while in the future helping charity. And those sections are called the social charity sections. That's what we call them because it's very similar to social charity, very similar to Social Security. Social Security is a process where you put money into a government program, and at the end of the day, they endow you with income for the rest of your life. And the same thing is true with social charity devices. They also endow you. So we have a formula that we call the theory of social charity, which is 664 equals E squared. That's a lot of language in a very short period of time. But it's all about creating income, all about creating what you need to live on. It's about the most important thing that you can do. My guest today is Freeman Lindy. Freeman is an expert in creating income. In fact, he's written several books, has a great website where he talks about retirement mentorship, mentoring in retirement or getting to retirement. How are you, Freeman?
I'm good. How are you, Les?
Okay, excellent. I had a chance to visit your website, and it's extremely well done. I must say it is focusing you on what the most important aspect of retirement is, which is income. Without that, we don't have much. In this climate, in this financial world that we live in, where you have inflation, we have a market that's questionable. All in this new year of 2024, we don't know what this is going to bring in the election. What are you telling your folks when you're mentoring them? What are you telling the most important things what's the most important things to do right now in this kind of a climate? What do you need to be concerned about?
Yeah, it's a great question, Les. Well, like you mentioned, I'm particularly focused on folks who are approaching retirement, in retirement, and generating that retirement income. And we always talk about, income that needs to do three things. I'm going to answer the question directly, but just to preface it a little bit, right, is that if you are entering retirement, right, you need income that's going to last you a few decades. Probably, right? The average two-person couple, 6 years old at retirement, the chances of at least one of them making it to age 90 or longer is in the high 80s or 90s, depending on which studies you're using, right? So people are going to live a long time in retirement. And I think a lot of people think that retirement's the finish line, that, hey, we got here, we did our savings, we invested, now we're here, now we can just kick back. But that's still a lot of time that we need this income to last. And so we talk about income that needs to do three things, right? It's the three Ds of retirement income. One, it needs to have go in the right direction, right? You mentioned inflation, right? It was a big problem, right? They seem to have tamed it now, thankfully. They made some moves. It was a little
We'll see.
painful in the meantime. It
Yeah.
was a little painful, right? But they brought inflation back down to reasonable numbers. We'll see if it sticks, right? Who knows? But you can't maintain a 7, 8, 9% inflation rate, right? It's untenable. But either way, you still will always have the raising rates of everything that you need and want to buy, right? Things are just going to get more and more expensive. And so in retirement, you need your income to go in the right direction, right? It needs to go up. You need to keep getting those raises that you've been accustomed to your whole life. Les, and I'm sure you remember like the first professional job that you got right out of college or whatever. And I don't know if you remember the annual income you made right out of your career, right? And you look at that, and then you look at, hey, what income did I need when I retired? Right. And could
Mhm.
you have lived off of the income that you came out of school with on the first year of retirement? And the answer is no, right? Probably not. Most people can't live on what they made, back in their 20s, when they're in their 60s. And in the same way,
Yeah.
over the next couple decades, your income is going to need to increase to match that rising tide of costs of everything that you need to buy.
All right.
And so that's number one, right? The second dimension that we talk about is duration, that it needs to last as long as you and yours, right? Or longer if possible, right? That you don't want to worry about as you're getting this income, you're getting the raises, that's all well and good. But if eventually the money runs out and now you no longer have that income, well, that wasn't a success, right? So it also needs to last as long as you're going to live, as long as your spouse is going to live if you're married, and continue on beyond that. And that's what I love about Route 664 and this idea of creating this income that then has an impact afterwards, right? That you can take care of yourself and your spouse, but
Mhm.
then still leave a legacy, make an impact when you're done. That's right. And that only happens if you have that duration component, right? You need some money left over at the end.
Mhm.
Otherwise, there's no charity, there's no social charity to leave. And so you need that part as well. But then you need this last one, right, which we call diversion, which is we need to be able to roll with the punches, right? I'm a financial planner, right? We make financial plans for people. You want a plan for how you're going to get that income in retirement, and then life throws you punches, right? We get a global pandemic. Russia invades Ukraine. We get 40-year high inflation. We get all these things, and there's always going to be some crisis. Right, there's
Yeah.
always going to be some reason why we shouldn't invest, or some reason why we shouldn't retire, or some reason we should get out of the market, and it's just going to keep coming. And the media loves crises; it boosts their ratings, they get a lot of ad revenue, and so we need to make sure that our plan, that our retirement income, can roll with those punches and maneuver and adapt and change, and make sure that we keep getting the direction and the duration that we need out of that retirement income.
So you have to have it managed, or you have to have. How do you keep that all moving in the right direction? I mean, you made some. I understand what you're saying when you're talking about having direction, that you need to have a constantly increasing. So what do you recommend to people to do to increase income? I mean, how do you get increased income in retirement?
Yeah, so this is where like I differ. I'm not unique, right? You don't want to ever work with someone who's got a unique, one of a kind strategy, because they're probably gonna embezzle your money or something like that, right?
Okay.
So
You
what
mean
I
they
teach
don't
is not
they're not they
unique.
don't work the one of a kinds?
No, no, if it sounds too good to be
Okay.
true, it is.
Yeah.
And so it's not unique, but it is rare, right? And that the conventional wisdom says that, when you're young, when you're in your 20s and 30s, invest in the stock market, right? Put your money in, take some risks. You got time for it to recover if it goes down. And then as you approach retirement, and certainly in retirement, right, the conventional wisdom, and I put that in
Hmm.
air quotes for our podcast listeners, is to pull back from that and to, shift more into bonds, into cash, into treasuries, into annuities, and
Yeah,
some of
trying to
these.
protect your assets. Yeah,
Yep, yep,
from risk. Yeah.
yep. And it becomes, hey, we're accumulating, and then we're going to decumulate now in retirement and kind of spend that down. And
Okay.
that's where I disagree, right? Because again, you've got a decade or 2 or 3 decades of retirement that you still need to live with, and everything's going to get more expensive throughout that. And so you need your money to keep growing even after retirement. And the best way to do that long term over decades, like we're talking about, is through investing in the best businesses in the world, right? And so what we teach on retirement mentorship, my podcast, my kind of educational side of the business,
Hmm.
is that we don't think of it as we are investing in the stock market. Because I think when we think of the stock market, right, we think of people on the New York Stock Exchange, rubbing, waving tickets and yelling at each other and trying to buy and sell and all these things and all that madness that's out there and trying to, sell where things are high and buy where they're low and pick the best stock. And all these images come to us when we think of investing in the stock market. And that's, some people do that, but we teach really of what we call becoming co-owners in the best business in the world, right? Is that when you invest in the great companies of America and the rest of the world, that you are truly, right, you are buying stocks in or ownership positions in these companies. And when these companies do well, you do well, right? Their values appreciate and you get growth that way. They pay dividends, they pay profits to you as the owners, and you get income that way. And over, any long stretch of time, any decades of time, the best way to get growth on your money is to be business owners, to own
Well,
businesses, not to loan
that's
to
the
them.
way it's been in the country as long as we've been in a capitalist society and without having a lot of government intervention and things that are going on with government. But I understand what you're saying is that there's that it's necessary sometimes to make choices about what you're going to do with your money with regard to the amount of risk that you're going to place it in and so on, and try and pick the least risky investment. But tell me about the role of taxes in this scheme of things. Taxes are a government issue. How do you deal with that? I
Yep.
mean, that's always changing because you get a new administration, you get a new Congress, you get a new bunch of hats in there that are going to try and figure out what to do, how to do it, and it's different.
Yep.
So what do you
And
do?
some, and sometimes, right, sometimes I feel like they change the tax code just to try to keep themselves employed. Like, hey, we're doing things,
Well,
we're
that's not
missing
far from the
things.
truth. So, I mean,
Uh, yeah.
we have a very complicated tax code of 20,000 pages, and most people have no clue what's in it, and they
Yep.
rely on their accountants to tell them, how to pay their tax. Taxes are a very important part of a person's overall uh, asset base, in a sense,
Yep.
because they take so much. What do you advise with
Yeah.
regard?
So with that too, right? And that's what I love about this podcast. I've listened to some of your episodes going back and whatnot, and I love the folks you have on that, right? Because so many people are too concerned with tax preparation, right? What do I owe last year, right? And we're just ending 2023 as we're recording this, and so people will be looking at doing their 2023 taxes, and they're all trying to figure out how do I maximize deductions and credits and everything for last year. Right. And if you're only thinking about it now at the end of the year, there's not much you can do for last year, right? It's past. December 31st is the deadline for a lot of tax moves you could make. And so I love that you are shifting people's perspective to how do we do tax planning, which is forward looking, right? How do we look ahead, and that we're less concerned with how much taxes we're paying last year and more concerned with how much taxes are we likely to pay over our lifetime. And if we can
Mhm.
minimize that, right, and have more for ourselves, send more to our charities and to our children, all the better, right? And so, we will pay the IRS every dime we owe them, but let's not leave them a tip. And so there are certain things that do change. They
Yeah,
change
right.
constantly, right?
Yeah.
But then there's other things that seem to be immutable that don't change, right? The 664, the section 664 has been there for a long time. They make little tweaks to it here and there, but that's been a tax planning strategy for a long time, right? Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks have been a strategy for a long time. And so
Right.
while they change the numbers each year, they add some credits, they take some credits away, they add deductions, they take them away, and those make an impact on the year-to-year basis. The main things that we're going to save taxes on are those big, long tax planning strategies. And way too many people are too concerned with getting a $200 deduction in one year and not concerned about the tsunami of a $200,000 tax bill that's coming up if they don't deal with some of these issues that are coming. And so, yes, we want to focus on, with last year's taxes, get every credit deduction that you can get, right? And so I'm an enrolled agent, which is the federal license to prepare taxes and to do that.
Oh,
So I'm
you're
that.
one of those guys, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I don't work for the IRS. It's a distinction. I don't
Yeah.
like the name because it
You
sounds
might.
like I'm an IRS agent, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I work for the taxpayer, and so as a CFP and tax advisor, right, I can do both, and a lot of times you get one or the other. It kind of gives me, I have that detailed look at what's actually happening on a year-to-year basis, and also that long-term planning strategy. And so things like Section 664 are things that people should really be taking advantage of because it makes such an impact and so much more can be done with their money than just waiting around and seeing what happens when they finally pass away with no planning
Yeah, my
whatsoever.
guess is Freeman Linda. And Freeman is a CFP, and also now we know he's a tax preparer, so he has some tax knowledge. We're going to come back after the short break. We'll be right back with Freeman. And we're back. My guest is Freeman Linda. This is all about how do you wend your way through retirement? What's the best way to create a retirement that will be there for the long term? People are living longer today. They're living to age 100 more and more. Social Security is has some issues. We've talked a little bit about tax planning. So in the process, we also were touching on the 664 and the use of Social Security. When you're trying to engineer a tax plan, do you look at them in terms of what you can do for them? I know it's late already because if you're doing the taxes, it's already end of the year. It's after the end of the year where they can't really go back and make any corrections. Do you do any pre-end of the year tax advice in your mentorship?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, a lot of the big things come up at the end of the year. So a few things that people should have been looking at. And
Mhm.
and if you're not working with someone or you're working with someone who wasn't looking at this stuff with you, then go to feeonlynetwork.com and find someone who will actually help you with these things.
Go to
Um,
what? What was that?
feeonlynetwork.com. It's what I think is the best place to.
Feeonlynetwork.com. What is
Yep.
that?
It is a network of fee-only financial advisors. So these are people that don't get paid any commissions. They
I
just
see.
get paid a fee to give you good fiduciary advice on whatever you're trying to
Got it.
plan for. And so they don't have that conflict of interest that a lot of other people might. And few things that are deadlines at the end of the year, right? One is Roth conversions. And so if you have too much money in a traditional IRA or your 401ks, and you're going to hit that RMD age eventually, which just got moved to 73 and 75, depending on when you were born and whatnot, but is anywhere
Yeah.
from 72 to 75. They will force you. The IRS is like, hey, you've had this money in these accounts for so long. We haven't gotten any taxes out of them. You've gotten, rich off of this. Now we want our money. And they will force you to pull a portion out of that every year for the rest of your life. And that portion increases each year as you continue to age. And if you don't take it, they will give you another 50% tax penalty on top of the taxes that you already owe. So you have to take it. It's not an option. And so for a lot of people, right, they've in their tax planning, which wasn't done very well, they've pushed money, more money and more money and more money into traditional IRAs, 401ks, and they're not aware of this, again, this tax tsunami that is coming at them when they reach that RMD age. And so part of tax planning is looking ahead and saying, hey, how much are you likely to pay in taxes when we get out to this point when you need to start taking these? And can we start taking them now, right? Can we proactively pay taxes at a lower tax bracket now instead of waiting until these RMDs push us up into a higher tax bracket later on, right? It is just math, it's just strategy, but you
Well,
do got
there's
to
a
sit down
couple
and
of
look at
things,
it.
tax brackets may not be higher later on. They may be lower later on.
Right.
That's a possibility. Somebody will come in and reduce the tax bite. That's a
Yep.
possibility, a distinct possibility if we changed administrations. The concept of the Roth IRA is, and the same thing with the RMD. Everybody's afraid of the tax, but it's not like they're not getting the income to pay the tax, and it's really tax that they should have paid in the past. And the reason why they're paying the tax now is because it wasn't taxable when it went in. So
Yep.
there's an offsetting principle there that makes it a little bit easier to cope with. Let's just take, for example, you have somebody that has a significant IRA or a significant 401k, and they do believe the taxes are going to be higher later on, and they would like to get tax-free income going forward. How do you create the tax deduction? How do you avoid paying the tax on the part that's on a part that is um, transferred, that's moved from a 401k to a Roth 401k, let's say?
Yeah, well, and so part of it too with that, right, is there's two separate things. There's the current tax rates, which at the end of 2025 are going up, right? Unless they extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which may be difficult with how much money they just gave out, right? The
Yeah.
the 10 and 12% tax bracket, or excuse me, the 0 and 10% stay the same, but 12% goes up to 15, 22 goes up to 25, and 24 goes up to 28. And so unless they lower tax brackets are going up. Like our rates are going up in
Okay.
2026.
I
But for
buy
other
that.
people too, if you are living kind of at the top of say the 22% tax bracket now, those RMDs may be more than you needed to take out for income. And so those might push you up into what is currently the 24% tax bracket and will be the 28, right? So I'd rather proactively pay taxes at 22 now than be forced to pay taxes at 28% later on,
Okay.
right? That's a 6% savings. But the other thing is too is tax conversions aren't for everyone, right? So kind of answer your question, if you are charitably inclined or you realize like, hey, if I just hold on to all this money until I pass away, then I'm going to give a bunch to my kids, but they're already well off. And by that time, they'll be in their 50s or 60s and they won't need it. and you start doing some forward planning, some overall financial planning, some estate planning, you realize like, hey, I want to give a bunch of this to charity instead. Right. I don't want to, and I don't want to wait until the end necessarily to give it all. I want to
Mhm.
enjoy the benefits and of that along the way. And so then there's a couple ways, right? You can, if you've got, again, a bunch in your traditional IRA, we don't do Roth conversions. Instead, once you're RMD age, you can do the qualified charitable distributions, right? Which is where you take it directly out of your IRA and you send it straight to your charity of choice. And you never take it, you never cash the check. Therefore, you never pay the taxes. And since it's going to a charity, they don't pay taxes. And so no one pays the taxes. Right. And so you have a lot of people that are given regularly out of their paycheck or their Social Security, and they should stop doing that and instead give it directly out of their IRA because they can increase the impact there by giving that tax bill straight to the charity instead of the IRS. And
And
we
that's
love some
part
of
of that's part of the road to human kindness. We want to build endowment in the nonprofit world. We want to encourage that, and the government does try to encourage that through these tax rules that they've put out, including that qualified deduction. People are not really aware of the taxes that they pay in a sense. People get surprised when they find out the amount that they actually pay because a lot of people just get the money taken out of their paychecks. At the end of the day, they get a refund and they think they're thrilled because they got money back. They're not getting anything that they didn't pay in advance. So there's a lot of uninformed taxpayers. Why is that?
Yeah, I think some of it's got to be that taxes just make people want to snooze, right? It's a boring topic for a lot of people. They'd rather not pay it and not deal with it. And that is part of it, right? Is there it's a little bit of monopoly money. And so right, just like what you said, right? People rate the tax year based on how much of a refund they got. And this was the problem with tax planning then, right? Is they'll ask their CPA questions like, hey, should I do a Roth conversion? Hey, should I do a donor advised fund? Hey, should I set up a charitable remainder trust? Like, you're my tax person. I should ask you tax questions, right? And what I find a lot, and what some CPAs have even told me, is, hey, look, people rate us, like they give us Google ratings for our business
Mhm,
based on how big of a tax return we give them, right? How much refund we give them. And if we
mhm.
give them a big refund, people love us. They spread the word. Our business grows. We're helping them save taxes. Everything's great. But if we have them pay in taxes, they don't like that. And
Right.
so it's a psychological issue, right? And so because it makes CPAs kind of hardwired to always want to save people the most taxes last year. And that's all they think
Really,
about
that's
is
really
how
that's really a very interesting observation. I never thought of that, Freeman. That really is interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you can get different. That's why you can get different. If you have a good CFP fee only planner who's doing a full financial planning, tax planning, estate planning for you, and says, hey, you should take advantage of Section 664. You should do a donor advised fund with this appreciated stock that you don't want to pay taxes on. You should start giving some of your charitable distributions straight to some charities. You should do some Roth conversions, like all these things, right? And then they'll go back and they ask their CPA and they're like, oh, you shouldn't do a Roth conversion. You'll pay more taxes. Why would you do that? Like you should delay those taxes. You'll have more money if you put it all into a traditional instead of doing a conversion or doing a Roth. And they're only looking at last year's. And so yes, if you want to get the deduction, if you want to pay less taxes last year, you can, put more money in an IRA, fully fund your traditional 401k instead of doing Roth. You can do this or that. But again, we got to shift that perspective from, hey, how much of a tax refund am I getting? And what's the actual tax bill that I'm paying? Right. And so
Yeah.
if we can
Well, it
switch people
depends,
to,
as we say, it depends on where you are in the game.
yep,
Everybody is in a different place in a different part of the game, and depending on what their individual circumstances are, and that's why it's important to work with a mentor or somebody that understands this, a trusted mentor, somebody that you can trust, somebody you give your tax returns to, in a sense, because that's what you need to look at. People need to know that they need to look at their budgets, they need to look at their assets, they need to look at their financial statement. When I find somebody that doesn't know what their budget is, doesn't have a current personal financial statement that they can put together quickly, and doesn't have documents, then we know that that's going to be an uninformed taxpayer.
yep.
So we want to inform them, and one of the ways to get informed is to work with folks like Freeman. And we certainly appreciate your being on Route 664, the road to human kindness. We want people to pay less tax, and by doing the planning that's proper, they can also increase their own personal income, and they can also increase what they're going to leave to the community. And we want folks
Yep.
like you to help them along that road to human kindness, the route to
Thank you for
human
having me.
kindness. Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
for being on, Freeman. We'll look to talk to you again soon. Thanks.
Sounds good.
A word about our radio station. Actually, we want you to get the app. But the app is really important. You can get it at Route 664 Radio. Go to your app store and listen all the time, because you'll get to hear great interviews like the one we just did with Freeman. You can learn a lot from those interviews, get a handle on what it means to do proper planning, to be an informed taxpayer, to be able to use the beauty of Social Security and all of the tools that go along with it that make you better able to deal with your own retirement, better able to deal with your own future, and do something really good for the community. It's a much better way to do things than just ceding to the government and letting the government's plan be your plan. If the government's plan is your plan, I guarantee you that it's the most expensive plan that you will have. You need to change and have your own plan. If I ask you if you're a philanthropist and you don't want to raise your hand, but if I ask you if you're a taxpayer, got news for you. If you're a taxpayer, you're already a philanthropist. You're just an involuntary philanthropist, and you need to change that to becoming a voluntary philanthropist, because when you do that, you'll pay less tax. That's the bargain that the government gave us, Congress, in their infinite wisdom. They were really smart. In 1969, they said, you know, what we see here going on, the demographics of the country are changing, people are living longer. Whatever we're doing to try and help them get through that long life with income or with health care or the other things that we're providing, it's going to get more and more difficult, and we need to put more of that back into the community at the local level. And charity is the best way to do that, because when the charities do what they're supposed to do and don't have to raise money all the time, they actually are the right way to solve our problems, whether it's from the standpoint of great care, safe care, great health, great streets, safe streets, and whether you want to have great education, great schools, safe schools. All of those things can be done using the charitable world and endowing the charitable world. It needs to be endowed. And that means that it needs to have enough capital reserve so that it can live off the income that it produces without having to raise money. That's the ideal situation. Sounds utopian, but in effect, that's the best way, and that's the way it used to be before government got involved in everything. And I'm talking about big government, small government, any government that makes payments to non-governmental organizations is wrong. You're not supposed to do that. They're non-governmental organizations. That needs to be taken care of by the public. The public can be induced to do that when you give them benefits, and that's what Congress did. Congress said, we'll give you lower taxes while you're alive if you leave something to charity when you pass. The problem is that most people don't know that bargain exists, and that's why they need to talk to somebody who can engineer an endowment for them, an endowment engineer. That's a new profession we've been talking about with regard to how the community can utilize the services of somebody who is in it only to educate about how to create endowments for themselves, for the person, and then also to leave behind. And that's a skill set that's really important and valuable in any community. We're working through chambers of commerce to help the chambers of commerce spread the word, because we think that's the best way. Chambers of commerce are generally nonpartisan. So if there's a chamber of commerce in your community, ask them if they have an ambassador program, and the ambassador program is one where the ambassador is also an endowment engineer, and that endowment engineer can help you wend your way through the theory of Social Security and the Social Security devices that you would be able to use, and that you'll find will help you in your life create more endowment income, get more income, and pay less taxes, and have more to live on. And at the end of the day, you become a philanthropist in a real sense. You leave behind something of value. And you can also spread the word, teach your children, teach others. Get the radio app, Route 664 Radio, at the App Store. Thanks for being with us. And thank you, Freeman, for being our guest today. Very interesting conversation. We'll be with you again, same time, same station next week. Have a great week.
Hey, Freeman,
Yes.
what were your parents thinking with that name?
I am one of 9 kids.
Oh,
We are alphabetically named. There are not a lot of F names, so they didn't care for Frederick or Francis or what's the other one? There's like one more. There's like 3 options. So yeah, now I'm like Ricky Bobby, except the opposite way. I have 2 last names. So if you enjoyed that, you would love being part of our free membership community. It's called Retire Membership, and it has a host of benefits, all for free. For example, you can always buy my book, 3D Retirement Income, on Amazon. But if you join us at Retire Membership, we will send you either a hard copy or paperback for free, provide the ebook and the audiobook so that you can listen to it if you don't have time to read it. In addition to that, we'll also provide you with a bunch of content that you can't get anywhere else. For example, we have our quarterly Retire Mentorship magazine, which comes out quarterly and has no ads whatsoever. It's just timely content to help you stay the course. We also have workbooks for our free online workshop to help you get the most out of those, flowcharts to help you make better decisions, and a weekly email to provide timely content that you can unsubscribe from at any time. We never ask for any payment information, and we never share your information with anyone else. We just want to provide timely content and help you stay the course to retire successfully and stay successfully retired. There's no reason to wait, so join us now at retiremembership.com, where you can click in the link in the description and it'll go right there. We can't wait to see you in the community. Cheers.